What I want to talk about today is something that happens every single day, in every city, in every public space around the world, and most people never stop to think carefully about it. It is the process by which two complete strangers move from having no awareness of each other to having an actual interaction, and sometimes even the beginning of a genuine human connection. This process is not random. It follows patterns. It follows rules that are not written anywhere but are deeply understood by every human being at a psychological level. And when you start to observe these patterns carefully, you begin to see just how structured and predictable human social behavior actually is, even when it feels spontaneous. Let me start from the very beginning. Before any interaction happens between two strangers in a public space, there is a period of passive observation. This is the stage that most people are completely unaware of because it happens automatically, almost below the level of conscious thought. When a person enters a public environment, whether it is a bus stop, a market, a park, a waiting room, or a street corner, their brain immediately begins scanning the environment. This scanning is not aggressive or intentional. It is protective and social at the same time. The brain is asking two questions simultaneously. Is this environment safe? And is there anyone here worth engaging with? These two questions are answered within seconds, based entirely on visual information. Posture, clothing, facial expression, direction of gaze, body language, and the general energy a person is projecting all feed into this assessment. Most of the time, the answer to the second question is no, not because the people present are unwelcoming, but because the conditions are not right. The timing is off, the social signals are not aligned, or the person simply has no need for interaction at that moment. But sometimes the answer is different. Sometimes something catches the attention. It might be something as simple as a person standing in an unusual way, or holding an object that creates curiosity, or wearing something that signals a shared interest, or simply making a brief moment of eye contact at the right time. These small triggers are what begin the process, and here is what is important to understand. These triggers do not force anything. They simply open a small window. Whether anyone steps through that window depends on what happens next. The next stage is what I would call passive signaling. This is when one person, having noticed another, begins to subtly adjust their behavior in a way that communicates openness without making any direct move. They might shift their body slightly in the direction of the other person. They might relax their posture. They might make slightly longer eye contact than is strictly necessary and then look away calmly, without tension. They might smile briefly, not a forced or performative smile, but the kind of small, genuine expression that communicates that they are not closed off. What is happening here is that one person is essentially sending a low-risk signal to another. They are saying, without words, that an approach would be acceptable. This is a deeply human behavior, and it is cross-cultural to a significant degree. The specific gestures may vary, but the underlying communication is universal. Now, the person on the receiving end of these signals is also processing them, usually without realizing it. Their brain is registering the shift in posture, the eye contact, the expression, and it is making a calculation. Is this person safe to engage with? Is this a genuine signal or an accidental one? Is the social cost of approaching worth the potential reward? And this calculation happens very quickly. What most people experience consciously is simply a feeling, a sense that it would be natural to say something, or a feeling of hesitation that holds them back. But underneath that feeling is a very complex and rapid social analysis. When someone does decide to initiate contact, the way they do it is critical. The most common mistake people make when analyzing public interactions is to focus on what is said. In reality, at the very first moment of contact, what is said matters much less than how it is said, and the context in which it is said. A remark about the weather, a comment about something both people can see, a question about directions, a brief observation about a shared situation like a long wait or a crowded space. These are not just conversation starters. They are social probes. They are low-investment signals that give the other person an easy exit if they do not want to engage. This is important. A good first contact always gives the other person a way out. It does not demand a response. It does not create social pressure. It simply opens a door and waits. The tone of voice in this first moment is something that experienced observers pay close attention to. A tone that is too eager communicates desperation, which triggers discomfort. A tone that is too flat communicates indifference, which gives the other person no reason to engage. The tone that works is calm, relaxed, and slightly curious. It communicates that the speaker is comfortable, that they are not in need, and that they are simply open to a moment of human contact if it is welcome. This tone is difficult to fake convincingly, which is why genuine comfort and social ease are so important in these early moments. When the other person responds, and this is a response to that first low-investment signal, the interaction moves into a new stage. Now there is a tiny thread of connection. And what happens next is determined by how that thread is handled. A lot of interactions die at this point because one person pulls too hard on the thread. They respond to a brief, casual comment with a long, detailed answer that overwhelms the other person. or they immediately ask a personal question that feels intrusive, or they shift their body too close too quickly. Any of these moves can break the fragile early connection, not because the other person is unfriendly, but because the social contract has been violated. The unspoken agreement in early interaction is that each step should be roughly equal in investment. If one person shares a small observation, the other person returns a small observation. If one person takes a small step forward, the other person either matches that step or gives a clear signal that they are comfortable with it. This is the rhythm of natural conversation, and when it is disrupted, people feel it immediately, even if they cannot explain why. The gradual building of comfort is perhaps the most interesting part of this entire process to observe. It happens through a series of small exchanges that each add a tiny amount of information about both people. Early exchanges tend to stay on external, observable topics, something both people can see or experience. A shared situation, something happening nearby. This keeps the conversation safe because neither person is revealing anything personal. As comfort grows, the topics begin to shift slightly inward. One person might mention something about their day or their reason for being in this particular place. This is a small disclosure, and it serves as an invitation for the other person to match it. If they offer a similar small piece of personal information in return, then the conversation has moved to a slightly deeper level. And this back-and-forth escalation of disclosure is how conversations move naturally from surface level to something more genuinely connected. Body language continues to communicate throughout this process, often more loudly than the words being spoken. When two people are genuinely becoming comfortable with each other, their bodies begin to mirror each other in subtle ways. If one person leans slightly, the other tends to lean slightly in the same direction. If one person's posture relaxes, the other's tends to follow. This mirroring is not deliberate. It is an automatic reflection of growing synchrony between two nervous systems. It is a physical signal that connection is being established. When you observe public interactions and you see this mirroring happening, you can be fairly confident that the conversation is going well, regardless of what is actually being said. Eye contact plays a unique role throughout all of this. In the very early stages, eye contact that is held for too long can feel threatening or uncomfortable. The appropriate amount is brief, comfortable, and natural. As the conversation develops and comfort increases, eye contact can be sustained for longer without creating tension. In fact, as genuine interest grows, both parties tend to hold eye contact more consistently, and this itself sends signals to both people that the connection is real. There is something about sustained, comfortable eye contact between two people who have just met that signals mutual engagement in a way that nothing else quite can. Now I want to address something that is often overlooked in discussions about public social interaction, which is the role of misunderstanding and misreading. Even in interactions that are going reasonably well, misunderstandings happen. One person makes a comment that is taken differently than it was intended. A joke lands wrong. A question comes at a moment when the other person is distracted or slightly uncomfortable. What happens at these moments is very revealing about both people and about the nature of the interaction. In a genuine, naturally developing interaction, these moments tend to be smoothed over quickly, not because anyone is being dishonest, but because both people are invested in maintaining the connection. One person senses that something landed wrong and adjusts their tone or clarifies what they meant. The other person, recognizing the adjustment, gives the benefit of the doubt and moves forward. This kind of natural repair is a sign of social intelligence on both sides. When misunderstandings are not repaired, when one person doubles down on something that created discomfort, or when one person becomes defensive rather than explanatory, the interaction often begins to deteriorate. The other person becomes more guarded. Their posture changes slightly. Their responses become shorter. They begin to look for an exit. This is not a dramatic process. It is very quiet and very gradual, but it is clear to anyone observing carefully. Social awareness, or the ability to read and respond to the social signals of others in real time, is what separates interactions that develop naturally from those that struggle. A person with high social awareness is constantly receiving and processing information about how the other person is responding. They notice the small shifts in posture. They notice when a person's energy changes. They notice when a line of conversation is creating engagement versus when it is creating distance, and they adjust accordingly, not in a calculating way, but in an organic, responsive way. This kind of awareness cannot really be performed. It develops through genuine attention to others and genuine curiosity about human experience. Emotional intelligence plays a closely related but slightly different role. Where social awareness is about reading signals, emotional intelligence is about responding to them appropriately. It involves recognizing not just what someone is signaling, but why they might be signaling it. A person who suddenly becomes quieter in a conversation might be bored, or they might be processing something they found interesting, or they might be slightly uncomfortable. An emotionally intelligent person does not simply react to the signal of quietness. They read the context, consider the possibilities, and respond in a way that addresses the most likely underlying cause. This might mean asking a gentle, open-ended question. It might mean giving the other person more space. It might mean redirecting the conversation to something lighter. The ability to make these kinds of nuanced adjustments in real time is what allows interactions to continue developing past the point where less socially aware people would lose the thread. One of the things that strikes me most when observing public interactions is how much timing matters. Two people can exchange exactly the same words in exactly the same tone, but if the timing is wrong, the interaction falls flat. Timing in conversation is about rhythm and pace. It is about not speaking when the other person is still processing. It is about not rushing to fill every silence, because silence in early conversation is not always uncomfortable. Sometimes it is simply the space where both people are deciding what comes next. A person who is comfortable with silence signals confidence and ease, and this is attractive in a social sense. It invites the other person to take their time and speak naturally, rather than feeling pressured to keep up with a pace that does not feel organic. The physical environment has more influence on these interactions than most people realize. Certain spaces encourage interaction, and others discourage it. A busy, loud environment creates barriers because it is physically difficult to communicate and because the energy of the space is already overwhelming. A quieter space with a comfortable pace allows people to hear each other, to think, and to speak naturally. Waiting areas are interesting environments because they create a shared context automatically. Both people are waiting for something, which gives them an immediate common ground without any effort. Parks and outdoor spaces work well because the relaxed energy of the environment reduces stress and makes people more open. Marketplaces and commercial areas create natural conversation starters because there is always something to react to or comment on. Each environment shapes the kind of interaction that is possible within it. What I also want to address is the role of intent and how it shows up in interaction even when it is not stated. People are remarkably good at sensing when someone has an agenda. When a person approaches another with a specific goal in mind, whether it is to sell something, to persuade someone of something, or to achieve some outcome, this intent often leaks through in subtle ways. The questions feel slightly directed. The conversation feels like it is being steered. The other person begins to feel like they are in a script rather than a genuine exchange. This feeling triggers wariness, and often, withdrawal. In contrast, interactions that develop from genuine curiosity and genuine openness feel different from the very beginning. There is no steering. There is no agenda. Both people are simply present with each other, responding to what is actually happening rather than trying to produce a predetermined outcome. This is perhaps the most fundamental truth about human connection in public spaces. It cannot be manufactured. It can only be invited. The conditions can be created, the signals can be sent, the openness can be demonstrated. But ultimately, a genuine connection between two strangers requires both people to choose to engage. And that choice is made based on an enormous amount of information that is processed mostly below the level of conscious awareness. The way a person carries themselves, the quality of their attention, the ease of their manner, the honesty behind their expression, all of this communicates at a level that is deeper and more reliable than words. When I observe these interactions happening in public spaces, what I am really watching is two nervous systems encountering each other and deciding, moment by moment, whether to open or close. Every signal that is exchanged either increases trust slightly or decreases it. Every response either confirms that this is a safe, worthwhile interaction or raises a small doubt. The accumulation of these tiny moments is what produces either connection or distance. And understanding this helps explain why interactions that look simple from the outside are actually enormously complex. Two strangers having a brief, easy conversation in a park have navigated dozens of these small decision points without either of them consciously realizing it. They have read each other, adjusted to each other, opened to each other in small degrees, and arrived at a moment of genuine human contact. That is not a small thing. It is one of the most fundamentally human things that exists. What I want people to take from this observation is not a strategy or a technique. What I want is for people to develop a deeper appreciation for what is actually happening in these ordinary moments. Because when you understand the complexity behind a simple conversation between strangers, you begin to treat those moments with more care. You become more aware of the signals you are sending. You become more patient with the process. You develop more respect for the other person's comfort and pace. And paradoxically, this kind of awareness and respect is exactly what makes a person better at initiating and maintaining genuine human connection. Not because they are trying harder, but because they are paying more honest attention to what is actually happening in front of them.